My name is Ranger Samuel Reed, and I have worked for the U.S. Forest Service in the Cascade Range of Washington State for nearly 20 years. That amount of time changes the way you see a place. The Cascades aren't just peaks and pines to me. They're a living, breathing system of ridgelines, weather fronts, fire scars, and old trails that remember things longer than people do. You start to memorize not just the landmarks, but the moods. How the air turns metallic before lightning, how ravens go silent before snow, how the smell of sap thickens near windfall. I've worked wildfire containment, search and rescue, wildlife monitoring, backcountry patrol. I've been snowed in, rained on, lost radios to static and batteries to cold. The mountains have a way of stripping you down to what's essential. Over the years, I've learned to respect them. Not in a poetic way, but in the kind that keeps you alive. Still, one night out there carved itself into my memory. So deeply, I've never been able to talk about it without feeling that cold crawl up my spine again. It wasn't supernatural. It wasn't folklore. It was human, and that's why it still unsettles me. It started during the late fall of 2017, when I was assigned to oversee a section of goat wilderness near the border between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. It's rough country, steep granite ridges, glacial valleys, and narrow game trails cut between stands of hemlock and fir. The season was winding down. The trailhead gates were due to close within a week, and most of the hikers had already cleared out. That's when we tend to find the stragglers, the unprepared solo campers, the stubborn through hikers trying to push one more leg before the weather shifts. My post that week was Clearwater Station, a small outpost cabin about 10 miles in from the nearest forest road. It's little more than a single room shelter with a radio, cot, and supply chest. You log weather, wildlife sightings, and trail conditions, and you check in twice a day with dispatch in Randall. It's quiet duty usually, the kind that lets you hear yourself think. The first few days were uneventful. A mild frost in the mornings, some elk boogling low in the valleys, a few reports of early snow farther north. I did my rounds, checked bridge crossings, flagged windfall, and hiked a few miles of Trail 96 that threads up toward the alpine meadows. Nothing unusual, though I did notice a faint wood smoke smell one evening drifting down the ridge. I logged it as an unconfirmed campfire, standard procedure, and planned to investigate the following morning. By dawn, the smoke had faded, but I found what I thought was the source about 3 miles up. A small clearing with a cold fire ring and a tarp shelter that looked hastily abandoned. The ground was trampled, and a half-burned notebook lay near the stones, its pages soggy and blackened at the edges. Inside were only fragments, lists mostly, coordinates, weather notes, something that looked like meal plans. No names. We get plenty of that. Hunters or trappers camping off permit, amateur survivalists testing themselves, even researchers passing through. I packed up what I could and left a notice at the site, dated and signed, warning that the area would be closed for the season. Then I hiked back toward the cabin. That's when I noticed the tracks. They weren't boot prints, at least not all of them. The first set was clear enough deep, narrow heel. Took 2 impressions, standard hiking tread, size maybe 10 or 11. The second set followed the first, but stepped slightly inside them, lighter, less distinct, as if whoever made them had been deliberately matching stride for stride. At first, I thought I was seeing patterns from melt or runoff, but the spacing was too deliberate. I bent closer and saw faint scuff marks along the edges, the kind left when someone carefully places their foot to cover another print. It's not uncommon for people to follow others' tracks. It's easier than breaking new trail. But these felt wrong. Too exact. Whoever it was wanted to hide the fact that two people had walked that path. I followed the trail for maybe a mile before it veered upslope, where the soil thinned to gravel. The prints vanished there, but the sense of being watched stayed. It's hard to describe unless you've been alone in deep woods long enough to know how silence shifts. The forest wasn't empty. It was listening. That night, as the temperature dropped below freezing, I sat inside the cabin writing up my daily report when the radio crackled. Static first, then a half-buried voicey. Station anyone at Clearwater. Copy. It was dispatch, faint but clear enough. I pressed the mic. Copy, this is Reed at Clearwater. Go ahead, Reed. We've got a call from a hiker at the South Trailhead. Woman reports hearing gunshots near Trail 96 last night. You see anyone out there? I hadn't. The woods had been quiet. I said as much, asked if they had a name. Caller didn't leave one. Dispatch replied. Said she was driving out and didn't want to wait for a ranger. Just figured we should log it. You're the closest unit. Check it out in the morning. Understood, I said, but I didn't wait until morning. I grabbed my flashlight, sidearm, and radio, and stepped out into the cold. The moon was thin, a smear of light through high clouds. Frost glittered on the brush. I followed the main trail for about an hour, fording back toward the abandoned camp. Every sound carried: the crunch of ice underfoot, the creak of branches, the faint rush of water in the distance. When I reached the clearing, the fire ring looked undisturbed. No tracks besides my own from earlier that day. I was about to turn back when my beam caught something pale near the tree line. It was a strip of cloth, snagged on bark. I walked closer and saw it was part of a flannel sleeve, torn clean, with what looked like a bullet hole through the fabric. My stomach dropped. I called it in, gave coordinates, and waited for acknowledgement. None came, just static. I adjusted the antenna, tried again. Nothing. I decided to mark the area with tape and head back. But as I turned, my light caught another shape at the edge of the trees. A low mound of disturbed soil. My first thought was an animal den. Then I saw the faint outline of boot prints leading to it. I crouched, brushing aside leaves. The earth looked freshly turned. Someone had buried something there recently. I didn't dig. Protocol says you don't disturb a potential crime scene. But I flagged it and hiked fast back to Clearwater Station. The radio came alive again only half a mile out. Reed, this is dispatch. Copy your earlier transmission. Units will mobilize at first light. Do not engage. I barely slept. The cabin walls felt too thin, every crack in the logs whispering with wind. Around 3 a.m., I thought I heard movement outside. Soft steps on the frost. I killed my lantern and waited, hand on my sidearm, listening. The steps circled the cabin once, slow, deliberate. Then silence. I wanted to believe it was an elk, maybe a fox. But I'd been out here long enough to know animal gait. This was bipedal. Human. At first light, the team arrived. 2 deputies from Lewis County, plus another ranger, Alan Pierce, who'd been stationed down at Packwood. We hiked back to the clearing together. The sleeve was still there, the mound still undisturbed. When we finally dug it up, it wasn't what we expected. Not a body, a duffel bag. Inside were clothes, canned food, rope, A hunting knife, a journal, and a small handheld GPS with the batteries removed. The journal contained more of those lists. Coordinates, times, weather, but again, no names. One line, though, stood out. Written on the inside cover in block letters. CLER Wheeler KB Owen 8 UNTL Hees Alomi. I stared at it longer than I should have. The deputies took photos, bagged everything, and said they'd file it as evidence pending investigation. I stayed quiet, but my pulse didn't settle. By afternoon, the weather turned. Heavy fog rolled down the ridge, swallowing the valley. The others decided to hike out before nightfall. The trail back to their trucks was steep, and they didn't want to navigate it in the dark. They offered to let me come with, but duty meant staying. The station had to remain manned until the seasonal closure, and I wasn't about to abandon post. So I stayed, alone again, the fog closing in, and that line from the journal looping through my mind. Wait until he's alone. The fog came fast that evening, so thick it blurred the edge of my flashlight into a dull halo. Out here, fog doesn't just hide distance, it eats it. Sound collapses inward until you can't tell if a twig snap is 10 feet away or 50. The ridgeline disappeared. The forest became a single, breathing shape. I kept the lantern low, more for my nerves than for light. The logs of the station creaked in the cold, expanding and settling. I double-checked the windows, latched the door, and made sure my sidearm was within reach on the cot. Still, every few minutes I found myself glancing toward the small glass pane above the sink, half expecting a silhouette to be standing there, staring in. There's a strange thing about being alone, long enough in a place where you shouldn't be alone. You start rehearsing every possible version of the sound you're about to hear. A footstep, a knock, a voice calling your name. When nothing comes, your brain supplies it anyway. By 9, the radio started hissing again. The storm front must have been interfering with the signal. I tried dispatch twice and got only static. Then, faintly, a click, like someone keying their mic and not speaking. I waited. Another click, longer this time, followed by a burst of quiet breathing. Dispatch, this is Ranger Reed at Clearwater Station, copy. Nothing. Then the same breath, too deliberate to be wind, too close to the mic to be accidental. I turned the gain down, listening. The breath came again, then a soft scrape, like fabric brushing plastic. "Who is this?" I said. Static swallowed the reply, if there was one. I shut the radio off. It sounds like cowardice, but experience teaches you something out here. Don't chase noise you can't place. I'd had hikers get disoriented, hunters on the wrong frequency, even kids pranking from baseband radios near trailheads. But that breathing didn't feel random. It felt aimed. I made coffee just to give my hands something to do. The propane hiss was loud in the silence. I drank it standing, watching the fog press against the window like slow smoke. Around midnight, I finally lay down on the cot, boots still on. The plan was to rest until first light, then hike to the ranger station at Wallup to report in person. If the signal didn't clear, sometime in the night, I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I froze. The sound wasn't steady like an animal rooting. It was measured, 2, 3 steps, pause, then another. Someone moving slow, careful not to trip. The door had no peephole, only a cross brace window, too high to look through without standing. I reached for my flashlight and clicked it on, keeping the beam low. The steps stopped. For several seconds, nothing. Then a faint tap on the window. Not a knock, more like something lightly striking the glass. I aimed the flashlight at the pane. A pale smear of condensation covered it from the fog outside. Nothing moved. I held still until my own heartbeat slowed enough to hear past it. That's when I realized what had made the tapping. Someone had drawn a fingertip down the glass, leaving a clear trail through the moisture, a vertical line. Then, slowly, another, crossing it. An X. I stayed like that for maybe half a minute, staring at it. Then I stepped back, racked the slide on my pistol, and called out. First calm, then louder. Forest Service. Identify yourself. Silence. The line of the X was already fogging over again, vanishing bead by bead. I waited until dawn. No more sounds came, no movement. But when I finally opened the door to check, I saw footprints in the frost, single file, leading from the tree line straight to the window, then looping behind the cabin and vanishing into brush. One set only. Big. Male by the stride. The same pattern I'd seen near the buried duffel. I marked the prints, photographed them with my service camera, and logged the time. The radio was still dead. By late morning, the fog lifted enough that I could see across the ravine. Sunlight hit the trees like someone lifting a blanket, revealing the frost, white slope below. That's when I spotted a shape down near the creek bed. Something reflective flashing between the branches. I pulled the binoculars from the shelf and focused. It was a trail camera, mounted crookedly on a pine about 200 yards out. Not a park model, this was private gear. Smaller, camouflage casing, with a brand we don't use. It hadn't been there 3 days ago. I grabbed my pack and went to check it out. The snow underfoot had softened, but the footprints were still visible. New ones, too. Someone had been back through since sunrise. The camera was zip, tied to the trunk at chest height. I took it down, popped the SD card, and pocketed it for evidence. When I looked around, I realized there wasn't just one. 2 more cameras hung nearby, angled toward the clearing and the cabin trail. Whoever placed them knew where I'd walk. I hiked back fast. Every crow call felt too loud. Every gust of wind too targeted. Inside the cabin, I dug out the old laptop we use for data entry and slotted the card in. The files loaded slow. Dozens of time-stamped images from the past week. The first few were what you'd expect: deer, a raccoon. Some blurred motion shots of branches. Then the timestamps jumped forward. 2 nights ago. A figure appeared, half in frame. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, facing the cabin. Hood up, posture rigid. The next image, he'd stepped closer. The one after that. Closer still, until only the chest and gloved hands filled the frame. The final image froze me. Taken at 3:02 a.m. The same time I'd heard the footsteps. The lens caught the side of the cabin, the window visible in the corner. And there, faintly, was me, inside, holding the flashlight beam at the glass. He'd been taking pictures from behind me. I unplugged the card so hard the slot cracked. My hands shook. For the first time in years, I felt real fear. Not the survival kind that keeps you alert, but the kind that tells you something personal has shifted. Whoever this was hadn't stumbled across me by accident. They'd planned it. The coordinates in the journal, the duffel, the cameras. I packed my gear within minutes. Radio, firearm, food, map, and locked up the cabin. The plan was simple: hike down to the service road, find a signal, and call law enforcement. But the trail felt wrong from the first step. Small things you notice after years out here. The way certain roots stick out. The color of moss on a particular boulder. The bend of a dead spruce. landmarks that guide you even without a compass. But as I descended, those cues began to blur. A fallen tree I could have sworn was near the creek now lay upslope. A footbridge I'd crossed yesterday wasn't where it should be. It's easy to lose bearings in mountain fog, but the sun was out now. I had clear visibility. I stopped, pulled my map, and checked the coordinates on my GPS. Blank screen. I'd charged it the night before, but the battery read 0. I tapped it. Then, faintly, a click from the earpiece of my radio. Reed. The voice was muffled, male, unfamiliar. "This is Ranger Reed," I said quickly. "Identify yourself." Static. Then, more clearly, "You shouldn't have opened it." I froze. "Who is this?" The line hissed, then cut. I stared at the radio, half expecting it to come alive again. It didn't. For the next hour, I kept moving downhill, fast but cautious, until I reached the small footbridge that crosses Clearwater Creek. The boards creaked under my weight. Halfway across, I noticed something tied to the railing. A strip of the same flannel fabric I'd found near the first camp, knotted tight. Under it, a fresh set of boot prints in the mud, heading away from the bridge, back toward the cabin. He'd been following, then turned around. That realization hit harder than any threat could have. Whoever he was, he knew where I was going, and was moving to intercept. I left the bridge and cut off, trail climbing a steep bank through alder and fir. It's brutal terrain, slick roots, shale underfoot, but it bought me distance. By mid-afternoon, I reached an overlook where the road should have been visible below. Nothing but trees. The forest stretched unbroken, a green and gray ocean. That's when I saw the smoke. A thin column rising from near the direction of the cabin. Too dark for campfire, too steady for brush burn. I lifted the binoculars. The cabin was a smudge through haze, but the roof was intact. The smoke came from the clearing beside it. Someone had lit a fire right next to the trail cameras. I watched for several minutes. No movement. Then, faintly, the radio crackled again. "Reed." The same voice, low, almost conversational. "You left your door open." I looked down at the cabin through the binoculars once more. The door stood wide. For a long time I didn't move. The binoculars trembled in my hands. The image of that open cabin door, swaying back and forth like a pendulum. Smoke curled upward in a single dark column, steady as breath. Whoever had been out there wasn't gone. Training told me to stay put, conserve energy, and wait for daylight or backup. Instinct told me the opposite. The cabin held my reports, camera logs, the GPS. Everything that could help investigators understand what was happening. If someone was trying to erase it all, I couldn't let them. So I went back. I started down the slope, careful to keep to the denser undergrowth where visibility worked both ways. My boots sank into thawing soil, every step sinking with that damp suction sound. Somewhere above, a raven called. One long, broken note that echoed across the valley. It made the place feel emptier somehow. By the time I reached the creek, the light had changed. Lower, heavier, the kind that makes you realize how much distance you still have left. I crossed the bridge fast, pausing once to look at that strip of flannel still tied to the railing. The knot was fresh, and something new had been carved into the wood. Beside it, 3 lines crossing each other, like tally marks or a crude symbol. I didn't stop to think about it. The air smelled of smoke again, sharper now. When the cabin came into view, the fire was gone. Just a black patch in the dirt, still smoking faintly. The door hung open, one hinge squealing with each gust of wind.
"Forest Service!"
I called out, voice carrying hard in the cold. "Identify yourself." No answer. I waited a full minute before stepping closer, pistol drawn low. The air inside the cabin was stale and still. My pack lay where I'd left it, the cot undisturbed, the lantern still on the table. But the radio, the big mounted one, was turned back on. The channel light glowed red. I approached slowly, checked the mic. It wasn't broadcasting, just set to receive. Then it clicked. Read. The same male voice, softer now. "I told you not to open it." I yanked the power cord. The light died instantly. Whoever he was, he'd been close enough to re-enter the cabin after I'd left. Close enough to know exactly how to turn that radio on without tripping the breaker. Outside, something moved. Quick, heavy. I pivoted toward the window, just in time to see a figure vanish into the fogged tree line. I ran out the door, adrenaline dulling every rational thought. The beam of my flashlight slashed through smoke and mist, catching glimpses of motion ahead. Shoulder sleeve, then nothing. The forest swallowed it whole. I followed anyway, crashing through underbrush. Branches whipping at my face. The footprints reappeared in a patch of soft ground, same tread, same size, leading uphill toward the ridge. I followed them for maybe 200 yards before the light dimmed, and the fog thickened again. The prints stopped abruptly beside an old cedar. At its base was a small clearing, circular and unnaturally bare. No pine needles, no undergrowth, just damp soil tamped flat. In the middle lay something metal, half buried. I crouched. It was another trail camera, identical to the others, but this one was smashed open. The SD card had been removed. The lens cracked on eye that had been gouged. A sound came from the trees behind me. A low whistle, the kind used to get someone's attention. I spun, light sweeping across trunks, branches, fog. Nothing. Then, faintly, the radio on my belt crackled. "Don't follow me." I lifted the mic. "You need to identify yourself now. This is a federal investigation site." Static. Then, it already was. The voice broke up mid-sentence, fragments lost in static. But the tone chilled me more than the words. It was calm, almost conversational, like someone telling a story they'd told before. I backed out slowly, eyes on the tree line, until I could no longer see that flattened clearing. My legs ached from tension. I walked fast, but careful, all the way back to the cabin, locked the door, and sat against it until my heartbeat stopped racing. By then it was full dark. I tried the radio again, still dead. Tried the handheld, too, static. I could have hiked out then, through the night, but I'd already burned through most of my energy. And fatigue out here kills quicker than fear. So I built a small fire inside the stone hearth, half for heat, half for light, and sat watching the flames while the night pressed in. At some point, exhaustion took over. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember was waking to the sound of a truck engine. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the flashlight, and ran to the window. Through the fog I saw headlights cutting across the clearing, then the dull shape of a pickup crawling up the trail. For one insane second, relief washed through me. Backup. Maybe the deputies, maybe Alan. But when the truck stopped, the engine stayed running, and no one got out. I stepped outside, keeping the pistol low but ready. The headlights blinded me. I shouted,
"Identify yourself!"
Again, louder this time. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, lean, dressed in civilian clothes, face mostly shadowed under a hood. He raised one hand as if to show he wasn't armed. "Your read," he said. Not asked, stated. "That's right," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the back of the truck, dropped the tailgate, and pulled out a duffel bag. The same one we'd found buried near the fire ring. He set it down between us. "You should have left it where it was." The way he said it, low measured, wasn't a threat. It was disappointment. I took a step back, leveling my pistol. Hands where I can see them. Step away from the bag. He didn't move. "There's nothing in there you need to see," he said. Not anymore. The bag looked heavier than before. The zipper teeth were wet, dark with mud. "I'm not going to ask again," I said. He smiled, small, almost weary, and said, "You people never learn to stop digging." Then he turned, climbed back into the truck, and drove off. The sound of the engine faded into the trees, swallowed by fog and distance. I waited until the taillights vanished completely before approaching the bag. My hands were shaking again, but I forced the zipper open. Inside were the same supplies: clothes, rope, the empty GPS. But now there was something new. A folded sheet of paper sealed inside a plastic sleeve. It was a copy of my own report log. The one from 3 nights ago. Every entry word for word, except for the last line, written in handwriting that wasn't mine. He's writing this now. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I sealed it back in the sleeve, shoved the bag under the cot, and sat down hard. I didn't move until dawn. When the sun finally came, the forest looked ordinary again. Birdsong, frost melting. Mist burning off the ridge. I packed what little I had and started down toward the trailhead, radio silent the whole way. Halfway there, I met Alan Pierce coming up with 2 deputies and a forensic tech. Relief hit me so sudden I almost forgot to breathe. Alan took one look at me and said, "Jesus, Sam, we've been calling for 2 days. 2 days." I tried to explain, but the timeline didn't add up. According to them, I'd missed 4 consecutive check-ins. The fog had cleared the following morning. And when they'd driven up the access road yesterday, the cabin door was already open. They'd seen smoke too. Only a faint column. Like a signal fire. We hiked back together. When we reached the clearing, the duffel bag was gone. So was the flannel strip from the bridge. The trail cameras had been cut down clean. The only thing left was that flattened circle of earth under the cedar. And even that looked different now. Smaller somehow. Like it had been filled in again. The deputies wrote it off as vandalism, or a case of someone squatting in the woods. They took my statement, logged the coordinates, and promised to send a full investigative team once the snow cleared. It never happened. By the time winter broke, every trace was gone. The cabin stood empty, the soil undisturbed, no tracks, no sign of the truck or the man. I transferred to another district the next season. I told myself it was for better hours, but I knew the truth. Every night, when the wind hits a certain pitch and the trees outside my window sway the way they did that week, I still hear that voice on the radio. Calm, deliberate. You shouldn't have opened it. When I transferred east to the Okanogan district, the paperwork listed personal request as the reason. That was true enough. No one pressed for details. Rangers move around all the time. Burnout, families, injuries that aren't visible. It's the kind of job where silence is both expected and respected. The new post was quieter. Drier country. Long ridge lines that broke into meadow and rock. fewer deep valleys where fog could linger. I told myself I'd left the mountains behind me, that the incident at Clearwater Station was something to file and forget. For a while, it almost worked. I still woke early, still took comfort in the routines. Coffee, check, in equipment inventory. The new cabin sat near a fire road with an actual power line, and cell reception was spotty but real. Civilization, in other words. Enough to make me feel tethered again. It was late spring when the first envelope arrived. It wasn't official mail. No return address, no agency markings. Just my name, block letters, and the district address. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. Typed, Clearwater Station 2017 incident log incomplete. Missing attachments, photographs, GPS data, radio transcript. You're still writing this now. No signature. I sat at my desk staring at it for a long time. The phrasing, especially that last line, brought the cold back in a rush. I checked the timestamp on my sent files, referenced everything with our internal server. My logs were all there, exactly as I'd submitted them. But the attachments weren't. All of the photographs from that week gone. The GPS data file was empty, overwritten with a string of zeros. The digital copy of the radio transcript blank. I knew I'd uploaded them. It was standard protocol. Someone had deleted them after the fact. I brought it to my new supervisor, Ranger Carrie Morales, one of the few who'd been with the service longer than I had. She read the note, frowned, and said, "You think this is some kind of prank? Not a funny one." She shrugged. "Records drop all the time, Sam. Data gets lost. You know that. Not like this," I said. "Then make a new report. File it under follow-up request. That's all you can do." So I did. It went nowhere, same as the original investigation. But the letters didn't stop. A week later came another, same block letters, same lack of return address. "You missed a name." He didn't. That was it. I started checking my truck every morning. Under the seats, glove box, toolbox. I found the third letter taped to my rearview mirror, fluttering when I opened the door. The cameras weren't his. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside the cabin, and all, a branch creak, took on that same rhythm. I remembered from the footsteps circling Clearwater. I sat by the window with the lantern turned low, waiting for something I couldn't name. At dawn, I drove into town and handed the envelopes to the sheriff's office. They took them politely, said they'd look into it. But I could tell from their faces it ranked somewhere below stolen mailboxes and ATV noise complaints. A month passed. I forced myself back into the work. Fire inspections, trail maintenance, talking with hikers about leave, no trace policies. Routine became my shield again. Then one afternoon during an equipment check, I found something odd in the supply shed. A duffel bag. Same brand, same color. Buried behind snowshoes and spare tarps. I froze for a full 30 seconds before pulling it out. Inside, rope, canned food, a handheld GPS, battery removed, and a journal. The handwriting matched the one from Clearwater. I took it straight to Morales. She looked it over, flipping through the pages of coordinates and weather logs. "Could have been left by a seasonal worker," she said. "No one's been assigned to this post but us," I said. She hesitated. "Then maybe someone's idea of a joke?" That word, joke, kept coming up. It made me feel like I was standing outside my own life, watching people explain things that didn't line up. That night, I sat in my truck under the shed's floodlight and read through the journal. Same lists as before, Same structure, but this one had a date, May 24, 2015, 2 years before Clearwater. Next to the date was a single line written, in pencil, Ranger Kellner failed to report. Search terminated. I'd heard the name before. Ben Kellner, veteran ranger, disappeared while patrolling the southern end of the Cascade Range. They'd found his pack near a landslide area. Radio destroyed, no trace of him after that. Official cause presumed accidental fall. But seeing his name there, in the same kind of journal, that had somehow found its way to me twice, cut through every bit of logic I'd built around the story. I spent the next few days digging through archives, incident logs, disappearance reports, anything tied to that year. Most of it was sealed or not digitized. But one summary caught my eye. Recovered equipment camera trap damaged, flannel garment fragment, spent casing 9mm of unverified map annotations. Flannel. Camera spent casing, it was the same pattern. I called Alan Pierce. He'd stayed in Lewis County, still doing patrol work. When I told him what I'd found, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know the part they didn't put in the report, right?" "No." "They found a message carved into the inside wall of the old fire tower near that site. Didn't release it publicly." "What did it say?" "CLERYTR TMOITUTL HESALON." The exact line from the duffel. I felt something in my stomach drop. Alan must have heard it in my voice because he said, "You think someone's been planting this stuff? Or collecting it?" He exhaled. "Sam, let it go. I mean it. Whoever's doing this wants you back in it. Don't give them the satisfaction." But letting go had never been my strong suit. I requested a few days off, loaded my truck, and drove south. Not to Clearwater directly. The seasonal gates were still closed. But to the edge of the range, near the trail that leads in. The road was rough, half eaten by spring runoff, but I found the turnout where the old access track branched off. The forest looked different in daylight. Brighter. Smaller somehow. I parked, hiked in a mile or two, and stopped at what used to be the outer boundary marker. Most of the old signage was gone. The post half rotted. That's when I noticed the marks. 3 carved notches in the wood. Crossed lines, same as the ones I'd seen at the bridge. Someone had been back recently. I walked another half-mile and found what I didn't realize I'd been looking for. The remains of a trail camera, crushed flat into the mud. The casing was new, not the same model as before, smaller black plastic, unmarked. And beside it, pressed into the dirt, was a footprint. Boot treed, same pattern. I crouched, pulled my phone to photograph it, and caught a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. Up the ridge between 2 firs, someone standing. Too far to make out the face. But the stance was familiar, still deliberate, head tilted just enough to be watching. I raised my voice.
Hey! This area's closed.
"You need to identify yourself." No reaction. I took 1 step forward. The figure turned, slow and unhurried, and disappeared behind the trees. I started after them, but a branch snapped behind me. Close, maybe 20 feet. I swung around, but nothing was there. When I looked back up the ridge, the figure was gone. That was enough. I retreated the way I came, keeping my eyes on the tree line until I reached the truck. By the time I got there, my phone buzzed. First signal in hours. A voicemail from Alan. "Sam?" his voice said, strained. "Just got word from HQ. They're reopening the Kellner case. Someone sent them new photos. Said you took them." My phone fell silent after that. I hadn't sent any photos. The next morning, my supervisor called. "Sam," Morales said, "law enforcement wants to speak with you about an anonymous evidence drop tied to the old Goat Rocks file. You know anything about that?" "No," I said. "Well, they have images, time-stamped 2 nights ago, of the Clearwater cabin. Fresh ones." I felt the world tilt a little. "That's impossible. The cabin's locked down." They said the photos show a fire burning in the clearing. I remembered the smoke, years ago, and that first phone call from dispatch. A woman reporting gunshots. Unnamed, never traced. "What else did they say?" I asked. Morales paused. "There's a person in one of the frames, standing at the window. Can you see who?" Her voice lowered. "They think it's you." I sat in silence long after she hung up. The line on that first letter echoed again. "You're still writing this now." Somewhere between memory and record, between what happened and what got filed, someone was rewriting the story. And for reasons I couldn't yet name, they wanted me inside it again. The investigators came fast. 2 SUVs, federal plates. Gray jackets with a small crest patch. Not the kind that waste time introducing themselves. They arrived at my post before sunrise, asking for Ranger Reed. Their lead, a man named Harrison, looked like he'd been up for 48 hours straight, but still somehow had energy to burn through a room. He laid out a folder on the table. Photos inside, the Clearwater cabin, only these were recent. The timestamp said May 11, 2022, 48 hours ago. One shot showed the cabin door open. Another showed smoke curling from the clearing. A third caught a figure inside the cabin window, silhouette against lantern light. This was submitted to our office anonymously. Harrison said, "Digital drop. Claimed to be taken by you." "It wasn't," I said. "I haven't been anywhere near that site in 5 years." He looked up flat. We ran metadata on the image. The coordinates line up with the original case. But there's more. He slid another photo forward. A close-up of a trail camera. Same model I'd found shattered months ago. In the reflection of the cracked lens, clear as daylight, was a man holding the camera, face half turned. It was me, or someone who looked close enough to make no difference. "That's not me," I said quietly. "You filed a supplemental report from that sector 2 nights ago." Harrison said, "No, I didn't." He leaned back, studying me. "You sure about that?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and showed him the timestamps. "I was on duty here. All night. Morales can verify it." He didn't look at the phone. "You ever hear of a Ranger Ben Kellner?" The question was a trap, and I knew it.
Yes.
"Missing since 2015. Presumed dead." He nodded slowly. "You're aware his equipment list included items later found near Clearwater Station?" "I am." "And you submitted the only surviving copies of that evidence before it went missing." I said nothing. Harrison closed the folder and stood. "We'll need you to come with us, just to clarify a few inconsistencies." Morales caught my eye from the doorway, silent but worried. She mouthed something, "lawyer," as they led me out. The drive south was long and quiet. The farther we went, the more the terrain shifted from dry ridges back into deep evergreen folds. Familiar country. Too familiar. When the turnoff for Goat Rocks came into view, I knew before they said it where we were headed. The cabin still stood. Same roofline. Same clearing. But time had weathered it. Logs grayed, windows filmed with dust. The smell of char lingered faintly in the soil. "Mind walking us through what happened here?" Harrison said, Voice casual, like this was a site tour. I told him everything. The smoke, the duffel, the radio interference, the man in the truck. I left nothing out. When I finished, he nodded, then said, "Strange thing. Though, we calmed this place last month. Nothing here, no duffel. No cameras, no trace of recent fire. Then suddenly we get a new tip, photos, and you're in them. I told you." He cut me off. "Yeah, you didn't take them." The air hung thick for a long time after that. Finally he sighed, motioned to one of his men, and said, "Get a shot of that doorframe." The younger agent crouched, snapping photos. I turned away and froze. On the inside of the door, carved faintly into the wood, were words I hadn't seen before. The grain had darkened with age, but the letters were legible. Stopwritit. I felt something shift in my chest, recognition mixed with dread. Harrison stepped beside me, reading over my shoulder. "That mean anything to you?" I didn't answer. That night they drove me to the regional office in Yakima for questioning. Same questions, over and over, with minor changes in tone. Where was I on May 11? Who had access to my reports? Had I been in contact with anyone from the old Goat Rocks district? When I mentioned the anonymous letters, Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You still have them?" "2 of them. The others disappeared from my truck." "Disappeared how?" "I mean gone. Vanished." He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll add it to the list." They let me go that evening, but told me to stay within the district. Morales met me outside the office, handed me coffee, and said softly, "They think you're losing it." "Maybe I am," I said. "No," she said. "I checked your logs. Somebody really did file that report under your name, from your login, at 02:14 a.m. on the 11th. I stared at her. "From where?" She hesitated. "The terminal at Clearwater Station." That drive back through the passes felt unreal. Every bend in the road seemed to watch. The forest looked alive in the headlights, trees leaning just close enough to whisper. I parked outside the ranger housing compound near midnight. My hand shook so badly, I almost dropped the keys. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first. Wood smoke. Not from the stove, from outside. I stepped onto the porch. Across the meadow near the tool shed, a thin column of smoke rose into the cold night air. For a second, I thought it was someone burning brush. Then I saw the glow, small, deliberate, steady. A fire pit. Someone had built onely behind the shed. I drew my sidearm, clicked on the flashlight, and started toward it. The light cut through the smoke in slow spirals. The pit was shallow, lined with rocks from the creek. In the center burned a stack of paper, curling and blackening in the flame. I kicked dirt over it, smothering the fire. The smell was thick, chemical. I crouched and sifted through the ash. Charred paper fragments clung together, edges of printed text, partial words. I recognized the font immediately. Agency report forms. My name in the header. They were burning my old logs. A noise came from behind me, a branch snapping. I spun, light catching the shed door swinging slightly open. Inside, something shifted. Metal scraping metal. Who's there? No answer. I stepped inside, slow. The air smelled of oil and old wood. Tools hung from the walls, casting thin shadows. On the workbench sat a stack of objects wrapped in plastic. I pulled the nearest one open. Trail cameras. Dozens of them. Different makes and ages, each with its SD card slot empty. Something flickered in the corner of the shed. A small red LED. Blinking once every few seconds. I followed it to a corner post where a newer model camera was mounted. Its lens faced directly toward me. The light blinked again. Recording. I yanked it off the mount and popped the card. The LED died. My radio crackled immediately afterward. "Read," the voice said. Calm, familiar, drawn out through static. Still writing. I recognized it. Harrison. But his SUV was parked back at the housing compound, half a mile away. "How are you on this frequency?" I said. "You told us not to follow the noise, remember?" The signal hissed out. I stood there for a long time, radio in one hand, the cold growing heavier. When I stepped outside again, the smoke had thinned, but something else caught my eye. Across the meadow, under the light from my porch, someone was standing. Too far to make out clearly. Just the outline of a man. He lifted one hand, like a wave. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then headlights flared. Another vehicle pulling into the lot. Morales stepped out, flashlight sweeping. When she saw me, she frowned. "What the hell are you doing out here?" I looked back toward the meadow. The figure was gone. There was someone. I started, but she was already beside me, scanning the tree line. "No one's out here, Sam. I've been circling the access road the last 10 minutes. We walked to the fire pit together. She saw the burnt reports, the cameras. Her expression hardened. "Get inside," she said. "Now." Inside, she grabbed the satellite phone and called headquarters. While she waited on hold, I stared at the trail camera in my hands. The casing was warm, faintly humming. When I tilted it toward the light, I noticed writing scratched into the back plastic. Tiny uneven letters H-E, T-H-E-O-N-W-R-I-T-G. I set it down carefully, every instinct screaming to leave it alone. Morales hung up. "They're sending a team," she said. "Stay here. Do not go anywhere alone." I nodded, but my eyes kept drifting to the window, to the black outline of the forest beyond. Somewhere out there, someone was collecting the pieces of every story that ever started at Clearwater Station. Kellner's, mine, maybe others we never knew about. Someone who understood how we documented our work, how we trusted the record more than memory. And somehow, they'd learned how to write inside it. The night stretched thin. Morales and I stayed inside the cabin, the one room kind of silence that starts to hum after too many hours. The fire pit outside had gone cold, but the smell of burned paper still drifted through the vents. Sharp, metallic. We kept the lights low. They said 2 hours. Morales murmured, glancing at her watch. It had been 4. The satellite phone sat dead center on the table, mute. Every half hour she'd try again, get a tone, then static. They might have lost signal through the pass, I said, though even as I said it, I didn't believe it. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "You think someone's jamming us?" "I think someone knows how our systems talk to each other." The laptop on the desk flickered just then, faint glow under the lid. I hadn't turned it on. Morales gave me a look. I flipped it open. The login screen blinked, then bypassed itself. The desktop appeared, empty except for one file. COEROTR. Doc, my pulse thudded once in my ears. "Don't open it," she said. I did anyway. The document loaded slow, line by line, as if being typed in real time. Incident Summary, Ranger Samuel Reed, Goat Rocks Wilderness. Witness statements altered for clarity. Subject continues to misidentify himself as author. The cursor blinked at the bottom. Then new words appeared, one by one. He is not writing this. Morales slammed the lid shut. "We're done," she said. "We're leaving." We grabbed our gear fast: sidearms, radios, flashlights. The cold hit hard when we stepped outside. The meadow glittered with frost under the porch light, breath visible. No sound except the slow shift of trees. We made it to the truck. Morales turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. She tried again. Nothing. She leaned her forehead against the wheel. Batteries full. This doesn't make sense. Let's go on foot, I said. Fire Road connects to the main highway in 6 miles. We started walking. The beam of her flashlight stretched ahead in narrow tunnels of light. Behind us, the cabin window still glowed faintly. After maybe 15 minutes, the radios came alive. A burst of static first, then a voice, calm male, clipped. Unit Alpha, copy status check. Morales answered before I could stop her. This is Morales and Reed. En route to highway on foot. Vehicle disabled. Need confirmation your team's inbound. Pause. Then, negative. We show your signal at Clearwater Station. Confirm. We left that site 40 minutes ago. That's not possible. The radio cut out. Morales and I stopped walking at the same time. The forest was too quiet again. Even the wind felt like it had stepped back to watch. Then came a light, brief, distant from behind us. A flicker near where the cabin stood. Another flash followed, rhythmic, not firelight. Camera flash. We turned off our beams and crouched low. Through the trees, I could make out faint movement. A figure standing by the porch, angling something toward the cabin, small handheld. The flash pulsed again, once every few seconds. He's photographing it, I whispered. Why? I didn't have an answer. We stayed there until the flashes stopped. Then silence again. When we finally reached the junction where the Fire Road met the old service track, Morales froze. A vehicle waited there. Headlights off. Engine idling soft. Same shape as the one I'd seen years ago. The truck from the first night at Clearwater. Morales reached for her sidearm. You see anyone inside? Driver's side's empty, I said. We edged closer, keeping low. The truck's door was ajar. I stepped up, pulled it open with 2 fingers. Empty, except for what was laid across the seat, an envelope, sealed and marked in the same block letters as the first letters I'd received. I tore it open. Inside was a printed photo. The cabin again, window lit. 2 people visible inside, me and Morales, sitting at the table. Timestamp 10 minutes ago. She stared at it, color draining from her face. We've been out here an hour. I checked my watch. 11:42 p.m. The timestamp said 11:32. We're not staying here, she said. We moved fast down the road, away from the truck, away from the cabin, until our legs burned. When we finally stopped to breathe, the forest around us had changed. The trees looked closer, thicker. The slope steeper. Morales checked the GPS. Blank screen. Same zeroed battery symbol. She smacked it against her palm. This thing was fully charged. Yeah, I said. So was mine. A moment later, the radio buzzed again. Our channel, but not the same voice. This one sounded more distant, distorted, like a recording played backward and slowed down. Don't write. Then silence. We pressed on. At some point, we must have circled. The trees opened into a clearing that made my stomach drop. The cabin, again. Same structure, same clearing, but different somehow. The logs looked newer, the roof unbroken, the door straight. Like it had never aged. The porch light burned steady. That's not possible, Morales whispered. We walked closer. My hand brushed the doorknob. Warm inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and damp wool. 2 mugs sat on the table, steam rising, the laptop open again. The document blinking at the bottom of the screen. Morales stared at it. What the hell is this? Before I could answer, the radio on the desk clicked on by itself. We found the others, the voice said. Same story, different names. They all start here. Morales backed toward the door. We're leaving. But outside, a sound started. A steady crunch of boots on gravel. More than one pair. Coming from all sides. Through the window, I saw beams of light sweeping through the fog. Voices, low, indistinct. Not law enforcement. No uniform cadence, no commands. Just people moving slowly, deliberate, like they were circling something fragile. Inside, Morales hissed. We killed the lantern crouched by the far wall. The footsteps came closer. One beam passed across the window. Then another. A voice, close now, said, "It's still open." The door creaked. Someone stepped in. A tall shape, hooded. He carried a camera. Lens reflecting the faint glow from the laptop screen. Behind him came another, smaller frame, and another. They moved silently, methodically, snapping photos of the room, the table, the equipment. None of them looked at us. Then one stopped by the laptop, stared down at the screen, and whispered. He's caught up. Another replied. Then finish it. They turned toward the door again, and just before stepping out, the last one said, clearly this time, "You're not the only one who thought you were the author." The door shut. Morales and I stayed frozen until the sound of their boots faded into the woods. When I finally stood, my knees shook. The laptop still glowed. The text had changed again. Morales slammed it shut. "We're done, Sam. I don't care what's out there. We're getting out on foot and we're not coming back." But I barely heard her. Because as the laptop screen went black, I caught my reflection in it, and for a second, it wasn't me. It was the man from the truck. We left before the sun. The air was thick, pale with fog that refused to lift, and every branch dripping meltwater like the forest itself was sweating. Morales led. Neither of us spoke much. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware. We followed the service road north, heading for the ridgeline, where the terrain opened toward the highway. The forest shifted around us with each turn. Fallen logs that hadn't been there before. Paths narrowing and then widening like the mountain was breathing in time with our steps. An hour in, we stopped to rest. Morales crouched, checked her compass, swore. The needle spun lazy circles. "That's not magnetic interference," she muttered. "That's manipulation. Meaning somebody's feeding false data." Or, she trailed off. "Forget it." We sat in the damp for a while, breath clouding. I pulled out my notebook, the real one, paper, not digital, and flipped through the last pages. My own handwriting stared back at me, line after line of incident notes. But near the bottom the pen strokes changed, smaller, neater. Not mine. Subject continues to record after closure. He's approaching repetition. The last line was dated today. Morales leaned over. "You didn't write that." "No," I said quietly. "I didn't." We both turned toward the trees at the same moment. A distant click like a shutter. Then again, closer. Camera. We moved fast after that, cutting off, trail through brush, trying to reach higher ground. The air thinned as we climbed. Twice I looked back and saw flashes between the trunks. White pinpricks that vanished when I blinked. By midday the fog thinned, giving us a view of the valley below. There finally was a shape cutting through the trees, the glint of metal. The highway guardrail, We're close, Morales said, voice hoarse. We kept going until the trail turned to scree, every step sliding on loose rock. Then, as we rounded a bend, the landscape opened fully, and the relief in my chest turned to something cold. The road below was empty. Yes, but beside it, in a small gravel turnout, sat a truck, same one, doors open. Don't, Morales said, catching my arm. But I was already moving. The closer I got, the quieter everything became, like sound itself was holding its breath. The truck was clean. Dry despite the dew, no mud on the tires. Inside, on the passenger seat, sat a single manila folder. CLER real NCIDNT. ARHIV copy Morales joined me. We shouldn't touch it. I opened it. Inside were printed pages, photographs, reports, transcripts. Ours. Every word we'd written since the night before, even the things we hadn't uploaded. The final line at the bottom retrieved. 07 Tozer hours, Cascade Range. Status self-documenting, subject confirmed. My throat went dry. Self-documenting. Morales read it twice. That's what AI systems call recursive logging, a loop. Writing about itself as it happens. I thought of the laptop, the way the report kept updating. You think someone's feeding our data back into itself. Or it's feeding us, she said softly. The radio on my belt chirped. Static, then a voice, hers. Morales's voice. Read, don't trust what you see. He's still. The transmission cut. Morales stared at me, face pale. That wasn't me? The next moment, a second voice, mine this time, came through the radio. You should have left it where it was. We threw the radios into the ditch. Neither of us said a word for a long time. Finally, Morales exhaled. We're done being part of this story. We hike out, we go to the press, we tell everything. Let someone else deal with the cleanup. I nodded. It sounded like a plan, simple, solid. A way to claw back control. We turned toward the east ridge, the way the land curved down toward the open slopes. The forest grew thinner, wind stronger. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the ground. We walked faster. When we broke from the tree line, I almost laughed from relief. The world looked ordinary again. Sky, snow, distant valley. No fog, no tricks. Then Morales stopped. Ahead of us stood another cabin. Not the same, but close. Newer, maybe a replica, with the same narrow porch, the same single window, the same small clearing around it. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke. No, she whispered. On the door was a paper notice sealed in plastic, printed with agency letterhead. Property of U.S. Forest Service. Station Clearwater. Authorized personnel only. That's impossible, I said. Clearwater's 10 miles west. We circled it once. Fresh tire marks cut through the grass nearby, leading to nothing. The door was unlocked. Inside a table, 2 mugs still steaming. The laptop waited open. The screen glowed. Morales backed toward the wall. Sam, look at me. What's the last thing you remember before we left? The highway, I said. Before that, the folder. And before that, my head throbbed. The cabin. She nodded slowly, like confirming a diagnosis. They're not following us. We're caught inside the report. I wanted to argue, to tell her how insane that sounded, but my voice wouldn't form the words. Because in the corner of the room, on the floor, lay another duffel bag. The same kind. The zipper half open. Inside rope, canned food, and a folded sheet of paper. End of report. Awaiting confirmation from Ranger Reed. Morales picked it up, staring. They're waiting for you. Why me? Because you were the first to see it. The wind rose outside. The window glass shivered. For a moment I thought I heard footsteps on the porch again. Slow, deliberate. A knock followed. Once, then silence. I looked at her. "You hear that?" She nodded, eyes wide. I crossed to the door, hand on the handle. Morales whispered, "Don't open it." "I have to." When I pulled it open, fog rushed in like breath. No one stood there, just the forest. Except, down the slope, half hidden between the firs, someone was watching. Same figure, hooded, camera in hand. He raised it slowly, lens glinting, and I realized what I was seeing. He wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming past me, at Morales. The flash went off. I turned, blinded for a second. The room was empty. Her radio lay on the floor, still hissing faintly. "Stop writing it," her voice said from the static. The laptop screen flickered. The words rearranged. Subject terminated. Successor active. Continue documentation. My own reflection stared back from the dark glass, and for the first time, I couldn't tell which version of me it was. The one holding the pen or the one being written. Outside, the wind shifted. I stepped onto the porch. The fog parted just enough to show the ridge, the long line of trees leading down toward the valley. Somewhere out there, maybe miles away, the world was still moving. Dispatch radios, hikers, morning traffic. I thought about walking until I found it again. About telling someone, anyone. But even as the thought formed, I felt the weight of the notebook in my pocket. The pages still blank near the end. Waiting. When I opened it, the last line was already written. He's approaching repetition. The pen in my hand twitched, like it had a will of its own. I sat on the step and started writing. I've worked in the mountains as a ranger for years, but this one incident still gives me chills. Somewhere, a shutter clicked, and the story began again.